My mom's friend always seems to find an excuse not to pay for the meals she invites me to. She'll suggest we go out, but then she leaves without paying, acting like it's no big deal. Over time, I've ended up being the one who always forks out the money. One day, she invited me to stay at a hotel, and then casually dropped the bomb that I needed to pay $1,500. I was totally baffled and asked her what on earth she was talking about. She insisted that I foot the bill for our lodging. It was such an unreasonable demand that I'm still in shock. But I've decided it's time to set things straight and make her face reality. My name is Michelle. I'm 45 years old, and I work in an office. I live with my husband of 18 years, along with our daughter, who's in middle school, and our son, who's in elementary school. Since both my husband and I have jobs, we split the household chores. We help each other out. Whoever has some free time does the dishes, and we work together to manage our daily routines. My husband is really involved with our kids, driving our daughter to her sports activities and playing catch with our son. He's an amazing father, and I'm grateful to have such a thoughtful husband and adorable children to spend time with. One day, someone disrupted my peaceful routine. While I was taking out the trash, my neighbor and fellow mom, Susan, approached me with an invitation for coffee. "Good morning. How about coffee sometime?" she asked cheerfully. I responded with a non-committal "Oh, coffee." She explained that there was a new cafe nearby known for its delicious Korean bread. Despite my hesitation, Susan seemed eager to go. Susan, a mom of my daughter's classmate, hadn't interacted with me much before, but we'd had some recent interactions. She suggested going on Saturday, noting that my daughter had sports and my son had plans with friends, so it wouldn't interfere with family time. I was surprised that she knew my children's schedules and asked how she knew. She casually mentioned hearing about it from David, who's in the same sports activities as my daughter, and that my son had mentioned his plans. Feeling somewhat cornered by Susan's good mood and her knowledge of my kids' schedules, I reluctantly agreed to Saturday. She left after setting the date and meeting place, and I found myself committed to going to the cafe. When Saturday arrived, I wasn't feeling great after working overtime, but we had plans to meet at the station. Susan was nowhere to be seen even 10 minutes later, but then I spotted her waving from a distance, looking cheerful. "Oh, it's a bit chilly today," she remarked, without offering any apology for being late. She chatted all the way from the station to the cafe. When we arrived, there was an unexpectedly long line, even though the cafe had only been open for an hour. "Oh my, lots of young people," Susan commented. Most of the other customers were indeed young. I suggested going to another place because of the long wait, but Susan stubbornly refused, saying, "No, I want to try this bread." We waited in line for an hour before finally being seated. Guided by the staff, I felt tired. "Michelle, you should have gotten the drinks ready," Susan said, holding back my frustration. I smiled and apologized. Sorry for not being more thoughtful. The bread at the cafe that Susan had strongly recommended turned out to be delicious, and I felt very satisfied. I even thought about coming back with my family next time. As we were getting ready to leave, Susan suddenly excused herself, saying she needed to use the restroom, and hurried off. After waiting for another 5 minutes and feeling the stares of people in the waiting line, I decided to pay the bill. Another 10 minutes passed before Susan finally emerged from the shop, apologizing for keeping me waiting and mentioning that her stomach had been hurting a little. I asked about her condition, and she assured me she was fine now, walking ahead of me. Just as I started to speak, Susan cut me off, asking if I was thirsty and insisting that I pick something to drink. Despite my attempts to decline, she pushed me to choose, and I ended up picking some tea. "It's on me, enjoy your drink," she said, sounding smug. I thanked her, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was trying to cover the cost of the coffee and bread. I didn't feel comfortable explicitly asking her to pay, as it seemed awkward. Normally, wouldn't you ask the person how much it was? Feeling a bit uneasy, we arrived at the station before I realized it. Susan quickly said she had something to do and headed home. Since then, every time I was invited for tea by Susan, she would conveniently ditch the bill. Not only that, but she seemed to be gathering information about my family's activities from other people. Meanwhile, she would leave her kids with her in-laws on weekends and go out with friends, rarely being at home. Lately, she had even started leaving her kids with us to go out drinking on weekday nights. She would check when we would be home, bringing her child over before dinner, casually saying, "Oh, is it near dinner time? Well then, please take care of my child too." The child seemed happy to eat with us, feeling like siblings, but it wasn't the same for us adults. One time, I asked if her husband was home, to which she replied that he was often on business trips, so he wasn't there at the moment. "Take care, okay," she said as she left. It seemed her husband's absence was frequent due to work. Hold on, I thought, at least pay for the food, please. Honestly, with 2 grown children, the cost of food could be quite a burden. It doesn't make much difference with just 2 more, Susan said before leaving, but any homemaker should understand that. A month had passed since we started living this way and the kids were on summer vacation. On the way home, Susan from the neighborhood invited us to go out with our families. What should we do? On his way home from work, my husband had been approached by Susan. Since Susan's husband would be home, she invited us to go out during the holiday. If it's with the family, it's probably fine. If her husband is there, it shouldn't be a problem, right? With some apprehension, I considered the situation. I don't know, but the kids seem to be on board, my husband remarked. Apparently he had already discussed it with them, and they were excited. It depends on you and my schedule, he added. I was dumbfounded by Susan's strong-arm tactics and couldn't find the words to object. If the kids are looking forward to it, we have no choice, I reluctantly agreed. I contacted Susan and we arranged the time and place. Finally, the day arrived. As we gathered, I couldn't help but notice Susan's husband was missing. Unfortunately, he had to leave on a sudden business trip. It seems Susan's family wouldn't be joining us, just her and her 2 children. We decided to follow behind in separate cars. Arriving at the rental campground with fully equipped facilities, including cottages, we prepared for an overnight stay. While setting up the barbecue, the kids were already playing. Once everything was ready, we started grilling the meat. We had reserved food for 10, expecting Susan's family to join. Since her husband wasn't there, we had 3 extra servings. I worried we might have too much. Breakfast is always a favorite for the kids during the summer break, but planning lunch and dinner can be a hassle. We chatted casually while Susan just sat there. That's why today we're just grilling meat, easy peasy, I remarked as my husband and I busily prepared and grilled the meat. As Susan sits there with a cool expression on her face, she comments, "We have to watch the kids properly after all." But she only observes them from afar. When I call the children to eat the grilled meat, she reaches out and takes it, exclaiming, "Wow, that looks delicious." My children and I are surprised, and Susan suddenly realizes her mistake, saying, "Oh, is this for the children? I was thinking of giving it to them first, but it's fine since we're grilling more." The children look disappointed, but Susan just laughs it off, saying, "You better eat quickly or I'll eat it all up." My husband and the kids are taken aback by her behavior. Susan proceeds to eat even more meat than the growing children. We had planned 1 lamb chop per person, but she has already had 4 and is reaching for more. "Susan, you've reserved only 1 lamb chop per person. You've already eaten 2 extra ones for yourself and your husband, so please eat something else," I tell her, hoping she'll understand. It might seem like a trivial matter, but there's no substitute food because it's by reservation. "What? There are restrictions on what I can eat? That's stingy," Susan complained. I replied, "Didn't you check when you made the reservation?" She should have known exactly what and how much was available since we decided on it together during planning, and we talked about ordering more because we have growing children. Susan insisted, "I don't eat much, I have a small appetite. Just think of me as not there, and 1 extra portion should be fine with my children who eat well and the men around." I thought it would be safe to order for 10 people. We had 2 middle school children who could eat 2 portions each and 1 elementary school child who could eat 2 portions, so there shouldn't have been any problem with the amount. However, the meat was disappearing quickly. "Mom, I want to eat that meat," my son said, reaching for it, only to have Susan snatch it and eat it quickly. I was angry, but my usually mild-mannered husband was starting to show his irritation as well. The reason we couldn't strongly object was that Susan's children were also there. "Mom, don't act like a child," said Susan's daughter. "What are you talking about? Camping is all about survival, and survival means fighting over meat." The children seemed dumbfounded by Susan's childish behavior. Afterward, we finished the barbecue, played outside for a while, and then decided to take a break. The cottages were separate, so we could get away from Susan and catch our breath. It was supposed to be fun, but the tension was palpable. My husband looked tired, and I agreed, suggesting we eat breakfast and head home early the next day. We spent the rest of the time relaxing with the family and greeted the morning. Good morning. Susan came out of her cottage cheerfully. You're lively this morning, I replied. Of course, I ate a lot and relaxed. I had a great time, she said. For breakfast, we ate the provided sandwiches, played a little more, and then started preparing to leave. During the final payment, Susan was nowhere to be found. Susan's not here, I told my husband, and we looked around, but her children were also missing. Hey, where's Susan and her kids? I asked the children if they had seen her, and they said they were going to the restroom. As we waited for Susan to return and settle the payment, I asked the cashier to wait a little longer. After waiting for another 10 minutes, Susan still hadn't returned. Isn't this taking too long? My husband asked, looking concerned. I decided to check the restroom, but Susan and her children were nowhere to be found. Furthermore, her car, which should have been parked nearby, was gone too. I couldn't believe it. I felt a surge of anger building up inside me. How could she invite us and then run away without paying? It was infuriating. The total cost of the camping equipment, cottage accommodation, drinks, meat, and everything else came close to $900. Susan had confirmed the approximate amount at the time of reservation, and she had been the one who chose the place. She had rejected all the places I suggested and insisted that this particular place was perfect. Choosing a location that only allowed on-site payment now seemed like a premeditated act. We decided to head straight to Susan's house. Susan, please open up. I rang the doorbell several times until Susan reluctantly opened the door. Susan, why did you leave without saying anything? I questioned, feeling frustrated. Huh? Didn't I say I was leaving? She pretended not to know. Susan, you have to pay on the spot. Hand over the money, I told her, a bit forcefully. Oh, I forgot, but I don't have any money right now, Susan replied, appearing indifferent to the situation. We confirmed the amount in advance, didn't we? You were the one who set the budget, Susan. I finally spoke up, unable to keep quiet any longer. Susan kept insisting she had no money, so I asked her what was going on. I bought something I wanted before the camping trip. Look, she said, laughing and showing off her recent purchase. So you didn't have any money during the camping trip? I asked, getting irritated. But Susan continued to laugh without feeling sorry at all. Yeah, I didn't have it when I reserved, so what? She replied casually. I was fed up with Susan, who seemed to have planned this from the beginning. You planned this from the beginning, I accused her. Well, thanks to me inviting you, we had a great time. It's a win-win situation, isn't it? Susan retorted, showing no remorse. I confirmed one last time. So you have no intention of paying? Susan brushed off my persistence, saying, It's embarrassing how persistent you are. I told you I don't have the money. When I get it, I'll pay you back. Or are you trying to squeeze money out of someone who doesn't have any? With no shame and an unapologetic attitude, Susan laughed, and I reached my breaking point. I see, understood, I said, deciding to go home without saying anything more. I discussed the situation with my husband, and time passed. Susan suggested going to a tasty restaurant nearby, acting as if the past incident never happened. I'm sorry, I'm busy, so I'll have to pass, I replied, turning down Susan's invitations for the past few months, losing patience. Susan approached me with an angry look, asking, Hey, are you avoiding me? You're still holding a grudge over the camping thing. A few hundred or a few $1,000s, so what? I can't believe you'd avoid someone over that, even if it were several tens of thousands. Susan ranted, infuriated and talking fast. That's so, Susan. Let's go to an inn next time, I suggested, trying to diffuse the tension. Huh? Oh sure, you planned it. In that case, I'll have to coordinate with my family, Susan replied, becoming cheerful. I told her my husband had given me some alone time and was thinking of going on a 2-night trip. When she asked if my husband would mind taking care of the kids, I declined, saying he was busy. To the hesitant Susan, I said, I plan to stay for 2 nights from Friday. If it's difficult, I'll go alone. Susan suggested leaving her kids with her husband's parents and joining me on the trip. When I showed Susan the exterior of the inn, she became even more delighted. I'll book 2 rooms. There seems to be a spot in all, I informed her. Excitedly, Susan started looking up various things on her own. How about I invite my friends too, she suggested, so I agreed to make all the reservations at once. A month later, the day of the inn reservation arrived. Susan and her friends were at my house, looking puzzled at me. Aren't you going to drive us? Susan asked. Ah, sorry, I have to stop by my in-laws, so let's go separately, I said. Susan reluctantly agreed, and we headed to the inn in different cars. Wow, I can't believe we're staying at such a lovely inn, Michelle. Thank you, everyone exclaimed, amazed at the magnificence of the inn. Let's enjoy our free time then, I suggested. Susan and her friends seemed to be having a great time, seemingly forgetting about me. The first day was filled with eating, bathing, and sleeping. After the bath, I ran into Susan and her friends having a huddled conversation. Hey Susan, are you sure about staying at such an expensive inn? Can you afford it? One of Susan's friends asked. Yes, it's all on me, Susan boasted. Amazing. It's over $1,000 per person per night. So generous. Another friend exclaimed. In that case, I'll turn off notifications for texts and calls and spend time in his dream world until we leave the hotel, Susan declared. Susan said she would pay for her 5 friends lodging in full, and everyone was getting excited. The morning of the second day, they went to the spa for massages and were able to spend meaningful time healing their everyday fatigue. I tried texting Susan, but she didn't read or reply to my messages. Even by nightfall, there was no response. Hello, Michelle, it's morning already. Cheerful Susan called out. Ah, yes, that's right, I replied, wondering why I was stating the obvious. You overslept, so it's your fault, right? We're going home first, so pay $155,000, Susan said, catching me off guard. Huh? Overslept? $155,000? What are you talking about? I didn't understand her sudden demand. The last one always pays, right? Susan insisted. Yeah, I'm already home though. Didn't you see my text? I had informed Susan via text that I was going home. Oh, I wouldn't be looking at my phone in such a fabulous, unreal place, Susan explained. I clarified the situation, telling her I went home on a second night because my mother-in-law wasn't feeling well. Originally, I was only going to pick up the children and husband, who were out playing, but I decided to leave early. Why didn't you say something? Susan was angry. I explained that my husband contacted me late, so I texted her. She then asked, what about the bill? Thinking she was mad about me going home without paying my share, I reassured her, saying, don't worry, I've already paid. Oh right, that's fine then. We just have to return the keys at the front desk and go home, Susan said, her tone returning to calm. Well, yes, since it's on-site payment, please stop by the front desk. My part has been properly deducted. If the front desk handled everything properly, there shouldn't be a problem, I explained. You didn't pay, right? Susan asked again. Yes, I paid my part before I left, so it's okay, I replied, hoping to clear up any misunderstanding. However, Susan's next words made me uneasy. What about our part? With this question, I was sure that Susan intended to make me pay. Please pay for yourselves, I heard. After the bath, I reminded Susan, you were going to pay for your friends, right? Ah, well, Susan stammered. You were amazing. Honestly, I thought you were the worst kind of person for always disappearing when it's time to pay. So you really were going to pay back the money for the camp later. I misunderstood you, Susan. I'm sorry, I joked, trying to ease the tension. Wait a minute. I cut off Susan's protest and continued, tell me all about your wonderful time when you get back. See you later, and I hung up the phone. When I got home, my worried husband asked, are you okay? But I smiled and said, yeah, I'm fine. Later, Susan, who had invited her friends by saying she would pay, somehow managed to settle the bill using multiple credit cards. When Susan returned, her complexion was very bad, unlike the last time I saw her at the inn. I never intended to pay, she screamed as she went home. According to what the children heard from Susan's children, her husband, who had returned from a business trip, scolded her terribly. You have to earn and pay that large amount of $155,000 yourself, he said. Susan seemed to have started working part-time. For someone who had been leading a sloppy life, leaving housework and childcare to others, it must be a very tough time. She seems to be working so hard that she has no time to rest, both physically and mentally. I no longer receive invitations to play from Susan, nor do I have to look after her children. I've been able to regain a peaceful daily life. On holidays, I can spend time leisurely with my family, and I'm very happy.